Welcome to the Mastermind Group, Your Ideal Life, in association with the Noble Goldman Group. The power of the Mastermind is the principle through which you may borrow and use the education, the experience, the influence, and perhaps the capital of other people in carrying out your own plans in life. It's the principle through which you can accomplish in 1 year more than you could accomplish without it in a lifetime if you depended entirely on your own efforts for success. We will ask each member of the group to take a number and we'll read through the code of conduct in due course.
Okay, well, since it's just the two of us at the moment, I don't know if anyone else is going to join us, but we'll get started anyway. And we can just take it in turns to read this out. You can see it all right?
That's perfect.
Okay, do you want to start?
The purpose of the mastermind is to learn leadership, build teams, and create multiple sources of income together.
We are here to inspire and challenge each other to reach and exceed goals.
Each member is committed to their own success as well as the success of every member of the group.
We are committed to meeting in person or virtually for 1 hour every week.
We are present. There's no multitasking distractions during the meeting.
We are collaborative. We listen without interrupting, lecturing, or judging.
We celebrate each other's successes without jealousy.
We are honest and participate by giving thoughtful feedback.
We are open to listen to different perspectives without being defensive or offering excuses.
We trust fellow members enough to share fully.
We are focused, but we also think it's important to have fun during the meetings.
Yay, we'll have some fun. We are real and authentic. This is a no BS zone.
We allow ourselves to become completely aligned with each other, the higher forces, one mind, one soul, one love.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. So that's, as always, sets the framework for the meeting. And I'll just enlarge that again. Okay. So the topic for today's mastermind session, which is a small group today, Stan, is small but effective, I reckon. The topic I've come up with is being your best self. So it was prompted by a story that that Jo told me yesterday, actually, that she'd read. And it was a story of Katharine Hepburn and the actress, and she was a young child, and she was recounting this story where a father was going to take his children, and he had a family of 8, so a lot of kids there, all like bored one day and playing up and wanting to do things, but not really knowing what to do. So he decided that he would take them to the circus. So they all got very excited when he announced that to them, and were really looking forward to it. So off they went to the circus, and they got there and they joined the queue to get in. And as he approached the desk, he saw on the board how much it was going to be, and got to the counter and had this moment of panic when he suddenly realized that he couldn't afford to pay for all the children to get in, and obviously he wasn't going to take 1 or 2 of them in and not take the rest. So he prepared himself to turn around to the children and say, "Oh, look, I'm sorry, but we can't go today because we can't afford it." And the person behind him in the queue was Katharine Hepburn, and as a young child, and her father and her sibling. And the father pretended, took a $20 note out of his pocket, pretended to pick it up off the ground, and tapped the gentleman, the father, on the shoulder and said, "Oh, sir, I think you've just dropped this money," and gave him the $20. So the father was then able to pay for all his family to go into the circus. And that then meant that Katharine Hepburn and her father and sibling couldn't go into the circus. So he turned around and said, "Oh, well, sorry, but we'll have to not go in there today. We can't go today." And she said that it stuck with her. It was more a more important memory for her, and she valued it more, what her father did rather than actually going into the circus that day. So it stuck with her whole life. The benevolence of her father and his selflessness as a great example and a great role model. And so I thought, you know, for me, how would you define your best self?
Good question. Your best self.
So when do you think you have turned up as your best self? It doesn't necessarily have to be you giving $20 to someone to get into a circus. That was just the example that kind of prompted that thought pattern. Because I don't think I've ever given anyone $20 to get into a circus.
I don't know. I've paid people's groceries, you know, like when they're short $10 or so on groceries.
I don't think it necessarily has to be about giving money to somebody. I know that you do that. But maybe it's a moment when you connected and thought you're being, in some way, the best version of yourself. Like you're living, I suppose, in accordance with your highest principles. While you're thinking, I'll tell you one that occurred to me just a moment ago. And it was quite a few years ago now. I was back when I was living up in the northern suburbs. And I went to an ATM one night, and as I approached the ATM, somebody had just, I'd seen them as I was in my car, I'd seen them run up to the ATM, obviously in a bit of a rush, and they turned around and sort of ran away from the ATM. They hadn't been trying to rob it or anything. They'd been actually trying to withdraw some money. And as I walked up the steps towards the ATM and I got to it, I noticed that there was a $50 note sticking out of the machine. So they'd been in such a rush that they had left the money behind. And I had that moment when I thought, and I was broke at the time. You know, like we were struggling, a family with a mortgage and just me working. And I was at the point where I was getting paid monthly. And usually by about the third week of the month, there wasn't very much left. You know, I was sort of struggling, counting the value of the groceries and putting things back on the shelves and going, you know, do I really need that? No, we'll put that one back. So we were going through a bit of a hard time. So seeing a $50 note sticking out of the machine was quite tempting for me to go, oh, thanks very much. I'll just put that in my pocket and not say anything. But no, I made the decision that that would not be the right thing to do. And the right thing was to see if I could find out who that belonged to. And it occurred to me that, well, they have a camera above the ATM, so I'm sure they would have taken a photograph. So I'd be able to go into the bank the next day when it was open and give the $50 to the bank and say, if you can check on your camera footage, the person before me would have left this sticking out the machine. So I'd had all that conversation in my head and was about to do that. And just at that point, the person that had left it behind came running back up to the, you know, sort of all flustered and like, oh, did I leave my money sticking out of the machine? And I said, yes, you did. Here it is. But I could have easily said, no, I don't know. I didn't see it. But the thought was that I'd already made that decision. So in my mind, I knew that I was doing the right thing, which was to, because it occurred to me, I hadn't really taken much notice of who that person was. And it also occurred to me that you don't know how much that person would have needed that money. You know, they might have been in a far worse situation than me and they were really desperate for it, you know, and for me to take it would just be so wrong, even though my family was sort of struggling, going through a hard time. So I felt afterwards that it was a moment where I knew I had been my best self because the temptation was there. But I recognized it, but I went, no, I wouldn't do that because that's not me.
I had probably the same. We found a wallet, and friend said, "Oh, is there any money in it?" And I said, "I don't care. I'm just returning the wallet." And the guy was kind of surprised to find the money still in the wallet. He was kind of expecting when I rang up, it had his driver's license in it, his address, and when I rang him up, and when he got there, he was like, "Oh, the money's still here." And I said, "Yeah," but friends of mine had said, "Oh, we'll just take his money."
Yeah, isn't it funny how some people would say that and they go, and I told this story about the ATM, and some of the people that I told said, "Oh, I would have just taken it." And I found that quite interesting because I didn't think of them as bad people or dishonest people, but they felt it was a kind of a finders keepers, losers weepers sort of, you know, that old saying, that they felt it was justified that if someone had left the money, that was their own fault, you know, stupid them, your gain. So that's really interesting. So you didn't even check to see how much money was in the wallet?
I could read his driver's license without needing to go through his contents.
That's great. That's really good. You've just reminded me. I had a similar thing. I was years ago. I was running my backpackers hostel in Perth, and we had an office and the internet. We had a room with computers in. It was an internet room for people to go on, jump on the internet. You know, that was directly opposite our office, and I happened to go in there to sort of, you know, check that the room was tidy and clean up anything, pick up any rubbish. And I found a wallet lying next to the computer and nobody in sight. So I picked up the wallet, took it back to the office. And like you, I thought, oh, I wonder whose this is. And I opened it to find the driving license, found the name of the person. But I couldn't help but see that there was like this wad of cash sticking out of the wallet, you know? So I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, how much is there sticking out of this wallet? So I did have a look, and it was over $1,000, and you know, all in sort of crumpled notes, but it was a lot of money. And well, you know, $1,000 is a lot of money. It's not $50, and it would have been easy for me to just go, I don't know, some backpacker must have picked that up or something, you know, and just go, oh, beauty, $1,000. And I thought, no, I couldn't do that to someone. That would be just so wrong. So I contacted the person, managed to find their phone number, gave them a call. They'd actually left. They had checked out that morning and gone off in a car. But I contacted them, got hold of them. They came back probably about half an hour later. They turned up at the office, walked in to claim their wallet, took the wallet, turned around and left, and didn't even say thank you.
Wow.
And I was just like, wow, I'm quite shocked at that. You know, if I left a wallet somewhere and there was $1,000 sticking out of it, and someone took the trouble to phone me and tell me that they'd found it and gave it back to me with everything still in it, I would have at least said thank you. I would have probably bought them something or given them $20 or something to say, go and buy yourself a coffee or something. Thank you so much for that. You know, I would have done something like that. So I was quite shocked that the person didn't even say thank you. That really quite astounded me, but it didn't negate the fact that I knew I'd done the right thing. So yeah, people do surprise you sometimes, don't they? So is there anything else? Was it not, because we've had 3 stories about money there. Is there anything else where you felt like you were doing or connected with the best version?
I think when I left school, I did broadcast ops course, so it was a year-long course at TAFE. And we got to go and work at Telethon, and Telethon was a little bit different then. It was all at Channel 7 studios, kind of lots of people and crew. We got to assist and like be on the main floor and with the stars and all sorts of cool stuff. And I think the best one that someone said, it was one of the kind of older stars that would kind of rock up all the time. And he said, you're never so high as to stoop so low as to help a child. And you're like, oh, that kind of stuck with me.
Yeah.
And now Telethon's a little bit different, and they don't kind of do it the same way, and they don't have the kind of same staff and This year was a bit weird for telethon.
So you're never so high as to stoop so low,
That's to help a child.
or as to stoop low enough to help a child. That's very good. Well, it's a strange wording though. If you're stooping low, it sort of usually implies like you're um, doing something wrong. Stooping low, I don't know. It's an unusual way of putting it.
Well, I kind of took it as in to reach down.
Yeah, I know that's what they meant, but it's sort of stooping low sounds like you're doing something dodgy or dishonest. So it's a strange word.
I kind of thought of it as, you know, you're never so high in a pedestal, because this was
Yeah,
a top level star, and he was talking to top level stars when he was saying it.
yeah,
That, you know, like you're never so big as to
yeah.
reach
Not so
down.
important.
And there was a lot of, when they first started, there was a lot of that stuff where, you know, you get the home and away stars, and some of them were the divas.
Yes.
You know, give me a glass of water, give me this, give me that. You know, like, and if you're working the green room, you're running around after it. And where some of them were quite nice. You know, they're like, oh, where can I get a glass of water? And you're like, oh, I'll get that for you. Oh, no. Like, you've got enough on your plate. Just show me where the fridge is. You know, like, I
Yeah.
can get my own glass of water.
Yeah. That's cool.
And you'd have stars that would be like, oh, like, if it's not a limousine, I'm not going. And some of them are like, have you got a bicycle? I just want to go to the hospital and see the kids. You know, like.
So would you say then your best self, how would you define it? Is it when you're being in connect or in alignment with your highest values?
Well, yes. And I kind of remember a story. I'm pretty sure it's from Dennis Waitley, wherein, I don't know, someone was trying to apply for a naval application, and the guy said, who he was interviewing, said, did you always do your best? And he said, well, no. And then as he walked out the door, he says, why not? And you're like, yeah, okay.
Did you always do your best? Sorry, when was it? Who's that said that?
I'm pretty sure it's a story from Dennis Waitley or Zig Ziglar or one of those.
Right.
Don't quote me on that, but I remember him saying, you know, that a kid was interviewing to get into the Naval Academy or something like that, and then, you know, the commander said, no, did you always do your best? And he said, you know, he kind of thought about it and said no, and then as he left, the commander asked him, why not?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's quite sort of challenging, isn't it? Because we're all human, so we must all know that there's times when we haven't done our best. But by asking him that, he's got him to go away and reflect on it, I suppose, and reconsider how could he have been better. So yeah, so why not? Why didn't you do your best? And I suppose that's when you're not living in alignment with your values. But that's assuming that you have got good values. I mean, some people are brought up with not very good values. Like some people are brought up, for example, to think that stealing's okay because it's all about you and getting as much for you and your family as you can. So if you're brought up in a family of crooks, they would have the value that, yeah, there's nothing wrong with theft. You know, it's dog eat dog world out there. You just get whatever you can, take it from whoever you can take it. And as long as you're okay, don't care about anyone else. So there are people who are brought up like that. So I wonder what their values would be, because even criminals have codes of conduct to reform, don't they? Like, you know, you don't grass on people, or when you're in jail. So interesting question that everyone would sort of define it according to their values, I guess.
And like I see a lot of it in, like when I grew up with sport, you did your best, and it wasn't argue with the umpire. Might have been the coaches that I had. Like one of the coaches we had was, you argue with the umpire, you take a seat on the bench. Like that was how it was. And like I remember, because I shifted from one team to another and we got a different coach, and his idea was to have everybody play, not just the best players play. That was everybody played, because then everyone got better. And if you argued with the coach or you argued with the ref, then you take a seat on the bench for a while, sort of thing. Where, you know, like some of the teams would play, to them it was play the best players, but we ended up getting, you know, in some cases getting, you know, winning the stuff because we had the best team, not just the best individuals.
Yes, very good.
Where everyone could play. And, you know, like he would, especially for basketball, he would sub us in and out quickly, but that meant everyone got, you know, in a 10-minute quarter, you kind of played 7 minutes. You know, and you know, occasionally you might have played only 6 minutes, but you might get 8 minutes in the next round. But then everyone seemed to get a go. Where, you know, some teams was all about, well, we put our 5 best players on and we just keep playing, you know, and then occasionally, you know, 1 minute to go, you know, they rest their top player by giving a couple other people a go. But then their team wasn't as strong, because one of our coaches was a statewide coach, so we had some full-on fitness drills just to, so it's all that like Coach Carter thing, you know, like we're just going to outrun them and beat them in the last quarter when they can't run anymore. But then a lot of it was about, you know, it didn't matter which 5 players were on the team, everyone was able to do stuff.
Yeah, so it was a squad game, really. That's a great point, though, about, you know, it's not necessarily the person who's most talented. If they're not a team player, then they're not necessarily going to do the best thing for the team. They might pull off the occasional moments of brilliance, but if they're not willing to work hard to help the rest of their team, then you'd be better off with an average player who is team oriented and willing to work hard. You just reminded me of something when you said about not arguing with the ref, because I play beach volleyball, and a few months ago I had a game where we had a fairly youngish umpire overseeing our game, and we had a crucial point that we won, but he disallowed it and gave it to the other team, and I queried the decision, because I'm like, what happened there? Why did we lose that? And he said, oh yeah, it hit the top net or something like that, and I was like, it didn't hit the top net. And I didn't probably ask him in as nice a way as that. I was like, yeah, I probably said, that didn't hit the top net. You know, I was quite sort of, are you serious? Because it was a crucial point, you know. And in the heat of the moment, like, we're really battling to stay in this game, and we needed that point, and it went against us. And then I thought about it, and I went, oh, you were an idiot there. You know, like, he's just doing the best he can, and even if he got it wrong, it's only a game. Does it really matter? And I saw him afterwards, and I just went up and said, oh, mate, I'm so sorry. I queried your decision. You know, it was just in the heat of the moment, and I just thought you'd got it wrong. So, but you know, you're the umpire, and that's fine. Whatever you say goes. And he's like, oh yeah, that's okay, man, no worries. You know, but I felt like I needed to go up and apologize to him, because I'd been, you know, I was sort of a little bit angry when I spoke to him, and it was just that moment of the sense of injustice that we'd been cheated out of a point, you know, that he'd got it wrong. But that happens in sport. You know, there's always those things. I always remember John McEnroe playing at Wimbledon. Do you remember the tennis player, John McEnroe?
I do.
Might be before your time.
No. My gran and stuff was right into tennis, so I kind of watched players like they would sit up and watch Wimbledon, you know, Pat Cash and back in those days.
Oh, actually, sorry, it was even further back than that. It was Jimmy Connors. Do you ever remember the name Jimmy Connors?
No, I kind of remember the name. I don't think I remember him watching, but I'm not a big tennis fan anyway.
I'm not now so much, but I used to watch it a lot then, and I used to play a lot of tennis back then. But John McEnroe was notorious for like having temper tantrums on the court. Jimmy Connors was not that way. He was just a heart player. You know, he gave everything. You could see he was doing his best, whatever he did out. Then he was actually a really nice guy, Jimmy Connors. Whereas McEnroe was a bit of a brat, or he had that reputation of being a brat. Interesting. He's now a commentator. But Jimmy Connors, you know, had a moment on Wimbledon where the line judge called the ball out, and it clearly wasn't out, or the other way around. I can't remember which way it was now. And he turned around and he's like, "You can't be serious."
Play that one over and over again.
I know, and he got a sort of reputation for that. But it was funny because he wasn't like that at all. He was one of those guys who was normally very gracious, but it was just, again, the tension of the moment and the importance of the point and the decision going against him. He's like, you know, this is just so wrong, you know, that I'm getting this. Whereas, I mean, now you do see them throwing their racket on the ground and all sorts, having a bit of a dummy spit when it doesn't go their way. So I suppose sport's an example where emotions are running high. So at times people are definitely not their best self. Can you think of a time when you brought your best self to the moment, and how did it express itself? Well, I know you gave the example of finding a wallet, but was there anything else that occurs to you? Think about maybe what are your values. So if you think, I don't know, so honesty is obviously one that we've latched onto there with the money examples. Giving.
I don't know. I always tend to bring that anyway. So I remember doing team building at work, and to me, I love doing the team building one, and then you get people and they're just like, "Oh yeah, just do this," and my way of thinking is, in a 90-minute session, we're probably going to get somewhere between 8 to 10 games done. Their way of thinking was, we're going to get 5 done. And like, my way of thinking was, I'm going to give everybody a first-class experience. And like, sometimes I only make the game 10 minutes, but then nobody gets bored, they're moving. Where I see lots of them do the team building, and it's kind of a chore for them to do, because they're not really participating, they just kind of facilitating, where I kind of, even though I'm not participating, my facilitation is more with everybody, not, us against them sort of thing. And I try and give them a first class experience, and try and get them to build teams and think about what they're doing and how they can do it better, and what they can improve for not just today but for the rest of their life, sort of thing. Like.
So when you're giving people the best experience that you can help them to have, that's when you feel you're connecting with your best self.
Yeah, and like same as with rock climbing. So when I do rock climbing, I like to, like, a lot of the instructors would say, a kid would struggle, and they'd be saying, okay, you can come down now. And I'd be like, well, where were you aiming for? Oh, halfway. Well, you're not halfway yet. Keep going. And okay, it takes a bit more time, and sometimes you don't get, like, everyone might only get, say, 3 climbs instead of 4, or even 2 climbs. They might get less, but a lot of them have achieved more than they thought they could get to. Where some of the instructors are like, oh, just get down, you're done. And you're like, well, you didn't actually help them do anything. Hang on a second, Tony. I'm just going to talk to my kids.
Yep.
It's easy to do when there's 3 of us, Tony.
Yeah, I know.
4 of us. You can just listen to somebody's conversation and then talk to the kids on the way through.
Yeah, and obviously you're going to get more input, different ideas. But then, yeah, I still think there's a value. The mastermind principle is that it's when you combine with another mind. So it's one or more. It doesn't necessarily have to be a whole group of people for you to explore a topic.
See, where is everybody else's commitment? Because it says we're committed to turn up once a week for an hour, and you're going, like, I just schedule it in. Like, it's not it would have to be something, let's say, I'm at a seminar for the day and I can't make, like, one event. But then you're like...
I think there's a couple of them that aren't into that rhythm yet, and a couple that make the Tuesday evening call, but can't make the Friday morning call.
That's different. That's
different.
That's hey, I'm coming to Tuesday because I can't make Tuesday.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Well, it is once a week, so your commitment's to once a week. Well, that's up to each individual person to determine whether they
are they playing their best self?
Well, we don't know. We don't know what the circumstances are. I know Glenn did let me know that he'd been to an airport pickup early this morning, and then he had a tradie coming over, so he had to be present to deal with that. But normally he's usually the first one waiting for me. Even sometimes he's ahead of me. So I
had it last night because I had I linked up with this girl on Coaches Helping Coaches, and she's in Charlotte, so she's doing coffee and chat, but not. It's a networking chat, but it's not a networking group like normal networking. It's she goes, I'm not going to have you do your 30-second pitch. We're going to get to know you by kind of like the questions that are happening now. You kind of answer questions and people know who you are and stuff. And so I'm trying to get on last night and I can't get through. And I'm just like, okay, so I just keep on going and I, try different emails and I try different connections and I go on Facebook and I start looking and I'm in 45 minutes past the start time. And I've even sent her a message and she said, it's just telling me to register for the 19th of November. Won't let me get in for the 5th. And she goes, we haven't started yet. Because they went onto daylight savings like last week.
Yeah.
But of course, I was still thinking I was like, oh, cool. He goes, I still can't get on because I don't have the right connection. She goes, I said, it's okay. I've only been trying for like an hour to get on. She's going, what? I'm like, yeah, I don't quit. I just find a different way to get there. Like sometimes I just go back to old emails or, like sometimes on Facebook they have the meeting code and stuff. So I just find the right thing and like work my way through stuff.
Would you say you were being your best self then, and you were being consistent?
I would say that because that's the second time that I've done that because the UK switched to their daylight savings turned off as well, and they were like 3 weeks ago, and I did exactly the same thing. So I was trying to get on, and I'm like, I'm going to be late, but like I just keep going, and then you find out that you haven't missed anything at all. You're an hour early. I have to remember when they turn to spring again so that I'm not an hour late.
Yeah. And I just lost my screen. I was trying to look at something. I got a ping on my phone, and I was just checking to see if it was somebody trying to get in. It would come up on the participant thing up in the corner, wouldn't it?
It usually does.
Yeah. No, it's all right.
Unless they're looking for a meeting code or something.
Yeah, well, that can happen.
Not me. I'm already here.
Yeah, so that's a good point that you've raised there. It's so the thing about the persistence there is that you persisted because you don't want to let people down.
Yeah, well, you're bringing your best self.
Yeah. So that's another aspect of being your best self, is to not let people down. So, and it's also keeping your word, isn't it?
Exactly. If you said you're going to do something, then, like, unless you're sick or, you know, had an accident.
Yeah. If you say you're going to do
and,
something, you try and do it. You do your
and
best.
I remember when we were training and stuff like that. When we said to friends, we had a rule: if we said we were going to meet somewhere, if you were more than 10 minutes late, you bought everyone a milkshake, and if you were more than like 20 minutes late, you bought everyone lunch. And that was before like mobile phone time. Like nowadays, people are like, well, I'm half an hour away, but it's 5 minutes to when I'm supposed to be. I'm going to ring up and say I'm late. I'm like, well, your commitment to me wasn't very high. Because if you're only now ringing me to say that you're running late and you're half an hour away, then you're not valuing my time. That's not bringing your best. And we do it so easily now because we've got mobile phones. You can just do it. Oh, I'll just type in that I'm running late.
It's interesting you've raised that there, because there's a book that it just occurred to me. This was a book I read a long time ago. Have you ever read The Four Agreements?
Yes, by Miguel.
Yes, Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember his last name.
Yeah. So just that reminded me of that. So
I'm listening, Tony.
I've just found it. I looked it up while you were speaking there. So be impeccable with your word was the first agreement. So when you give your word, you always speak with integrity and say only what you mean. Avoid using the words to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. The second one was, don't take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. The third one was, don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. And the fourth one, going back to your Naval Academy example, was always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are tired as opposed to well rested. Under any circumstance, simply do your best and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. Now, this book spent over 7 years on the New York Times bestseller list. So very, very relevant to our discussion this morning. The four agreements.
Well, there you go.
So a couple of other questions that I had prior to the meeting was, in what ways would you like to be a better version of yourself?
Tricky question. Ways would I like to be a better version? Not sure how to answer that.
Well, I suppose for me, I'm just writing my question down so I've got it in my notes. For me, it's to do what you know is right more often. And what came into my mind when I asked that was, there was a moment a few weeks ago when I was in the supermarket. I was in an Aldi store, and that, you know, they have things, the shelving's quite high, And I happened to turn around and I saw a lady, a little old lady, who was struggling to reach something. And I instinctively just immediately left my trolley, turned back and walked over and said, "Oh, can I get that? Can I help you with that?" And I just reached up and grabbed what she wanted off the shelf. She's like, "Oh, thank you so much. You know, I really appreciate that." And I just thought that was so easy for me to do. And I instinctively did it. I didn't think twice about it. I saw her needing that help and I immediately went over and helped her. But it would also have equally been easy to ignore it. And, you know, so my ego kind of went, "Oh, aren't you a good fellow, you know, doing that for that old lady?" And then I went, "What are you patting yourself on the back for, you idiot? That's what you're supposed to do. That's, you know, that's the way you should be all the time." And I think as best I can, I am that way. I wouldn't say all the time. I think the majority of the time, because there's probably a moment when I might have noticed something and didn't do something about it. But to the best of my ability, I always strive to be that person, to be the kind of person that would see somebody needing help with something and interrupt my whatever I'm doing to go and help them if I can. So I guess as a human being, you have to say there's probably moments when I haven't been my highest self because I've been too busy or something. So it's the same with, you know, if you're driving down the road and you see somebody broken down, do you stop and offer to help? Well, if you can see they're sitting there and they're on the phone, then the chances are they're probably calling, you know, the tow truck or the friend or somebody to come and help them. But if you saw somebody sort of broken down and they're and you've got, I guess it also comes down to how much time you've got. You know, when you're driving, if you're doing 100 Ks down the freeway, you've only really got a split second to make that decision whether to pull over or not, because otherwise you've gone past it and it's too late and you can't do anything about it. But my prospective son-in-law was telling me that he had stopped to help somebody on the roadside. You know, he saw they were broken down and he just immediately stopped and gave them a hand. And I think that's the person that, as much as I can, I would aspire to be. You know, when you see somebody who needs help, whatever that help is, if you can help, you would stop and help. But I'm sure there's been times when I would have driven past because I'm in a rush or you know, sort of on the way to something or running behind for a meeting or something like that. Or you see that they already are getting help from somebody else, then you're like, okay, well, they're okay, they're covered. So that would be my aspiration would be to always be that person that gives help to people if I can. So I suppose the first thing is to notice that they need the help, and then to be like not too busy, as in you've got a deadline or you're in a rush to get somewhere, or you know you're going to let somebody else down if you stop and take that time. I don't know. It depends on, is that excuses, or you know, should you just always do it anyway?
Yeah, and the question would be, like you said, sometimes is it, well, hey, I'm running late, or like, should I turn around and go back for them, or like, will someone else help them?
Yeah.
Especially when you got, as you said, a split second to kind of think about, and you can't just slam on your brakes on the freeway, like create a 90 car pile up. I was just going to help the person on the side of the road.
That just reminds me actually of a trip where we were driving up to now where was it? It would have been Geraldton, I guess. We were driving up to Geraldton. It was late on a Friday night. We were driving up there. We were going away on a dive trip. So we were going on a liveaboard boat for a few days and going to the Abrolhos Islands, just off the coast there. And So we were driving up there Friday night from work. We'd just finished work. We were like, okay, drive up through the night, Friday night, get on the boat late that night, and then we're off, you know, for the morning, and away to the Abrolhos Islands. And so as we were driving up this, we were on some very dark roads, and we were following another car. We didn't know where we were going when we got there. Like we needed to follow this car because they knew where the boat was anchored at the port, and how to get through navigate around the port and get to where the boat was parked. And we had no idea of that. And it was probably, it was a few years ago. So it was before we had sat nav in the car, or
You're supposed to do cultural day. You need your Australia hat.
and we didn't have on our phones then. We didn't have the, you know, you could just get the directions on the phone. So we literally
Not him, Cooper, just you.
we literally had to follow the other car, otherwise we wouldn't know where to go. So we had to keep them in sight. And the guy that we were following was hooning it. You know, he was really going pretty fast, and so we were probably like right on the speed limit, or even slightly above the speed limit, trying to keep up with him because we didn't want to lose him, because otherwise we wouldn't know where to go when we got to Geraldton. So we're going through these dark roads, and we saw a car parked on the side, and we saw somebody like frantically waving. But we had like a split second of seeing this person, and it was like, what's going on with that person? And then we were past them. I'm like, oh, they must have broken down and they're trying to get help. But it took that second or two to process, why was this person standing waving in the, you know, on the side of the road, and then realized that I'd seen a car, and it was only as we went past that I saw that the bonnet was up, because it was dark, you know. But by then, by the time I'd even thought that, it was already back there. And I thought, well, I can't stop, otherwise we're going to lose the guy in front of me, and then we won't be able to find out where we're going when we get the other end. So I felt bad, because I thought, well, really, it's dark, I should go back and help that person, but we can't leave these people, otherwise we're not going to know where to go. Anyway, we got to the boat, and we're all sitting having a drink on the back of the boat, and I'm telling the people on the boat this story. Or as we were driving up, there was this guy waving on the side of the road, and I'm presuming that they must have broken down, but we couldn't stop because we had to keep up with you guys. And anyway, we're sitting there waiting for this other couple that was supposed to come and join us on the boat, and they were late, and they hadn't, you know, an hour had gone past and they hadn't turned up. And we're thinking, this isn't like them. What's going on? Why aren't they here? And eventually, a few hours later, they turned up, and it was them that had been broken down on the roadside that were going away on the boat with us for the weekend. So the two cars had driven past this one car that had broken down, and it was our friends. And they were like, why didn't you stop for us? I'm like, oh no, we felt so bad then. But it was the first car that needed to make that decision, because we couldn't stop if they didn't stop, you know. Well, maybe we could have, but then we wouldn't have known where to go. I suppose.
You might have known, because your other friends might have figured out you weren't following them.
Exactly. They might have figured that out and then come back, but they also might have just carried on to their destination, and then we would have been...
then you would have been two couples lost together, wouldn't you?
Exactly, yeah. But it was just one of those stories where we were like, oh no, we didn't do the right thing, and then we felt so bad that we hadn't stopped and helped these people, and their car had literally broken down, and they'd had to get a lift, and I think their battery was gone or something. They'd had to get a replacement battery, and anyway, they had to get from where they were to the garage and then get the right. But you know, it was a big drama for them to sort it all out. But yes, how bad did we feel after that one? So yeah, stopping to help people or offering assistance when you can. And like, you know, there are times when you just can't, I guess, when it's not possible. But it doesn't take much. Like I said, sometimes it's the thing that, you know, Jim Rohn used to say, the thing that's easy to do is also easy not to do. There was another one where I was at the supermarket and up in Kalamunda in the car park, and I saw this elderly gentleman wandering around in a daze, and you could see that he was confused, and it looked like he was trying to find his car and couldn't remember where he'd parked it. So I was putting my shopping in my car, and I saw this going on, and I thought, you know, I need to get home and get this shopping unpacked, and I've got stuff to do and all that. But I saw this guy wandering around, and I just thought, he's an elderly gentleman. He looks confused. I think he needs help. Okay, finish, put the shopping away, close the door. This isn't going to take me long. It's not much out of my day to go and help someone. I went over and approached him and just said, "Can I help you? Are you lost?" And he's like, "Yeah, I can't remember where I left my car." And he really had no idea. And I said, "Well, what does it look like?" And he was confused. I think he might have had Alzheimer's or something, and he couldn't even remember what the car was. So I thought, this is going to be a bit of a challenge, but I walked around the car park with him for quite a long time, trying to figure out what was his car and where, and, you know, could he retrace his steps? And then I said, there's also another car park here. Are you sure you came in through this doorway into the entrance, or could it have been the other side? And he wasn't sure. Anyway, I started to walk him back up to the entrance to the shopping center. And another lady had seen me doing this as well, and then she came over and she sort of took over and said, "Oh, I'm going around to that other side. I'll take you with me." And so she took over and took this gentleman to the other car park to see if his car was over there. And I was kind of like, "Oh, that's somebody else has taken over and they can deal with it." I knew he was okay because he was being looked after by this other lady who seemed, you know, a decent, respectable person as well. But I just reflected on the fact that it was only a few minutes out of my day to do that, to stop and help someone. And yet it would have been so easy to just go, not my problem, get in my car and drive off. So that's when I would say is one of those examples where I realized that I was being a better or the best version of myself where I could be, because I did stop and help someone. So what is it that stops you being your best self, and what can you do about it? So one that I've already just mentioned was when you feel that you're under the pump, you know, you're on a deadline, you're in a rush, and that to stop would mean that you are possibly going to let somebody else down because you're not going to meet the deadline or the agreed meeting time that you've made with somebody else. So sometimes it's a trade-off of do I help this person and let that person down, or do I keep my word to that person and trust in the universe that somebody else will help this person, or they'll figure it out for themselves? Or is that an excuse?
Where's Keelan? Hang on, the boys are all trying to go.
No worries.
Okay, I'm back. We're having the lunch dramas.
No worries. You've got things to deal with there. So,
I said it's a little bit easier when there's a bunch of other people because you can just slide the mic off, chat to them quickly while everyone else is chatting.
No, that's fine. I'm, you know, I just appreciate that you've turned up and we're still able to have this conversation. So, keeping your word to yourself, or keeping your word to one set of people or one other person that you've already committed to, and you're on the way to a meeting or something, and you don't want to let them down, to stop and give help to this other person. So sometimes it might be a trade-off, and you go, okay, well, someone else can help that person. It reminded me then of a story which is quite an extreme one, but it was in the book Influence by Robert Cialdini. Have you read that one? Very, very good book, Influence. So it's understanding.
Doesn't ring a bell, but that doesn't mean to say I haven't read it.
No, I know you've read a lot of books. That's why I always check, because I think there's a good chance Stan might have read this book. But he tells a story in that where he gives makes the point that very often when you ask for help, if you ask generally, can someone help me? Most people will assume that someone else will do it. So he gave the example in the book where, say you're collapsing, you've got a medical issue and you're collapsing and you need an ambulance to be called. But people might assume that because you've fallen on the floor and collapsed that you're a drunk or you're on drugs or something. And so they walk past you, I've seen that happen, right? So he said, instead of going, can someone please call me an ambulance? You're better off actually picking somebody out of the crowd and going, excuse me, you with the purple hat there. Yes, you. Could you please call me an ambulance? Because they're more likely to respond to that because you've asked them personally to help you, and they will feel socially obligated to do something about it. When if you ask, can somebody do this, everyone will assume that someone else will deal with it because they're busy. And they won't want to interrupt their day, so they'll be like, oh, that's a drama, I don't want to get involved in that. I'll let someone else deal with that. And he actually gave the example, this story of a girl who was attacked. I think it was in New York. I might be wrong. It's a long time since I read it. And this girl had been attacked by somebody. She was walking down the street late at night and she was sexually assaulted by someone. I think she ended up being raped. But this attacker came at her in the street and she screamed for help. Now, it was one of those situations where like windows open or lights go on and people kind of look out the window and like, what's going on out there? They've heard the scream, but they all assume, oh, someone else, it's a drama, or there's an attack going on, or there's violence. I don't want to get involved in that. I might get hurt myself, or whatever their assumptions are. They assume that somebody else will deal with that. So they turn the light off, they close the window, and they go back to watching TV or whatever they were doing. So this girl managed to get away from the attacker and ran down the next street, where he then caught up with her again. And the same thing, she screamed for help. Same thing, lights went on, people looked out, everyone assumed someone else would deal with it. She got away again. Third time she got attacked, this time she got raped. Again, she screamed out, and people later on said that they heard the screams, but they all assumed that someone else would do something about it. So that's when he went on to say, if you're ever in a situation where you need help, try and find a specific person to ask rather than asking generally, because generally everyone leaves it to somebody else. So for me, that would be to try to be that person in the crowd, or that person who does do something about it if you can, if it's within your power. But I can also understand that there might be a situation, especially when there's violence involved, where you might be afraid to think, oh, I don't want to get involved in that because I'll probably get hurt. So
yeah, but it's actually quite common for people to, and I would say, okay, don't get involved, but you might want to call the cops. But everyone's too busy filming it to call the cops.
Yeah, call the cops, do something, do what you can. But you know, it's like with first aid. They say the first thing about first aid is to make sure that you're safe. So you know, if someone's lying on the floor being electrocuted by an electric cable or something, don't put yourself in a position where you're going to get electrocuted too. Otherwise, you're no use to that person. So there is that. So, but then there's also the stories of the Good Samaritan that runs in and, you know, breaks up the fight or chases off the attackers or something. You know, I suppose that comes down to then your personal confidence, your ability to handle yourself in a fight in that situation. But yeah, your perceived level of competence to deal with that situation. If you have the skills and the ability to do it, then perhaps you should. But if you know that you don't, then you do what you can. So yeah, that's another situation. Anyway, we're sort of coming to the end of our time. So for me, I think it's an interesting question to explore. What does it mean to be your best self? And for me, that really means living in accordance with your values. And so some of the things we've talked about this morning is being honest in situations where that honesty might be tested, like, you know, finding money. In your interactions with people, your communication with people, to not be abusive or obnoxious, or you know, be affected by the emotion of the moment, to try to be calm and be nice to people despite whatever your feelings are at the time. You gave a great one there, to give your best experience to people where you are in a position to help them have a better experience. Respectful communications, again, about, you know, not arguing with umpires and things like that. Being persistent in your willingness or your determination to not let people down, like you pursuing getting into the meeting because you said you would be at the meeting. So keeping your word, being generous when you can be, and generally helping others where you can. So all being the best version of yourself when you're doing those things. Anything else that you wanted to add to that?
I think you covered most of it.
Cool. I'm sure there's something else that somebody watching might think of, but been an interesting exploration of that topic. So thanks so much for keeping your word, Stan, and for being here today. And I always enjoy talking to you. So thank you for today, and I hope you have a fantastic day.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and for more information about joining one of these mastermind groups for free, how they can benefit you, the magical personal development program, plus the wealth creation opportunities that are all available to you through Noble Goldman, contact Tony Inman via www.tonyinman.com.au.